Good morning, everybody. I can see that people are logging on, but I think we've got to a static number at the moment, but I'm sure a few people will join us a little bit further in. Welcome, everybody, to our Building Sustainably webinar. Thank you for joining us. We've got an illustrious panel of speakers, which I'm really, really pleased about. I thought this would be a good idea to do with the new government and their emphasis on building. I thought a webinar on building sustainably would be, would be quite useful. Having lived in Brentford for quite a number of years, I watched the GSK global headquarters being built about 25 years ago, and now it's virtually empty, and there are plans for its redevelopment, which will involve some demolition, I'm sure. It's only 25 years old, but the major part of the building, the bit with the lovely glass, the sort of the angular glass bits, which reflects the sky and so well. Hopefully that will still remain, and it's still so cutting edge. It just seems wrong to me that a building just lasts 25 years. But I'm just a layperson. But as I say, I'm so pleased that today we have our panel of experts to talk us through the topic. So over to our first speaker. Please welcome Professor Ibrahim Shaaban from University of West London, who will talk about what UWL are doing on the research side. Ibrahim, over to you, please.
Thank you, Sally. Good morning. I'm very happy to talk to you today about the building sustainability and durability and our efforts in the University of West London. I shall share my screen. Okay. Okay.
Excellent.
What are our efforts towards sustainability and durability? And I related sustainability to durability because we are in civil engineering work with construction. So we want to make sure that we use sustainable materials, make our buildings sustainable and durable in the same time with minimum maintenance for a long time. Yes. This is the facts about building sustainability and the construction and the related items or factors such as climate, watershed, transportation, infrastructure, air quality, different materials used, sustainable materials. Who are we in University of West London? We are a group of teaching and research members in civil engineering. And I am happy to mention here our teaching and research efforts. We aim to develop quality of teaching, good quality of teaching, to relate to the sustainability goals of the United Nations. We aim to do research to use our interdisciplines for the analysis and design of materials, new structures, experimental work, sustainable and durable materials, geotechnical design as well, and sustainable infrastructure. Let's start with teaching. With teaching, we recently developed a new program, structural engineering program. We aim to improve the build skills for the graduates, for the engineers, for the graduates, for surveyors, to know more about structural adaptation, how to convert the building, to change the function of the building from a use to different use, what to do regarding that, how to evaluate the buildings economically and from the structural point of view, how to use innovative materials for the structural adaptation. These were the aims of this program. We started this program 2022, and this year we started with just 3 students. Now we have 15 students enrolled this year, and some of these students to do the MSc structural engineering program are PhD holders and surveyors, chartered surveyors. These are the United Nations goals. Many of these goals are satisfied in the structural engineering program in civil engineering. This is the screenshot of the program with the different modules. We have mutual modules with civil engineering discipline, but the mainly 2 new modules are structural adaptation and structural systems analysis, which deal with the existing projects, small projects like a house conversion, adding a loft, changing the function for any building from a use to different use to satisfy social and economic and durability points of view. These are the professional bodies which accredited our program. These are the lab facilities. We have a fully equipped fluid mechanics labs, structural lab, concrete lab, and soil mechanics lab, geotechnical lab, to do the testing for our research projects, and to serve for industry as well, for collaboration with industry. These are the features of the sustainable building. If you want a sustainable building, you have to achieve all that to some extent. We are dealing with civil engineering, construction, and structural engineering with green materials and proper testing and maintenance to make the building in the good form. The green materials, how to use sustainable materials or green materials, or the optimize the use of the material for specific range of conditions to make the materials durable for the construction. For example, some material can be used in dry condition and cannot be used in coastal areas with a high humidity. We aim to reduce the carbon footprint. We aim to reduce the cost as well. This is the University of West London strategy for the annual report 22 to 23 as an example, and this strategy 22 to 30. We aim for this to address many items related to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, and mainly we concentrate on reducing carbon emissions and to optimize the use of our resources and to use the waste materials in construction rather than increasing the carbon footprint by leaving these waste materials without use. This is the plan of sustainability for the research. And as I mentioned, we concentrate on minimizing the waste and constructive use of the waste in civil engineering construction. This is the current research at University of London towards sustainable and durable building construction, which is in line with the University of West London sustainability strategy. We use the recycled aggregates. Recycled aggregate from crushing cubes for the demolition of any buildings. We crush these aggregate and reuse them, so we don't have waste of aggregates for our undergraduate or postgraduate students. When they use the concrete, we can crush the cubes again, and we have special tools to get the crushed aggregates to be reused. This is a recent conference in Lyon, France. I presented this paper about the durability and sustainability. This paper was a collaboration with our colleagues from the German University in Egypt, University of Liverpool, and Kingston University. We dealt with the crumb rubber from the old tires and waste steel fibers to be used in concrete to different percentages. We tried to optimize the percentage of crumb rubber and steel fibers to obtain durable concrete. And what I mean by durable concrete, the concrete which has minimum cracks and narrow pore structure to make it impermeable. So impermeable or less permeability means less harmful agents to attack and better performance. This is another paper was recently presented in Florence, Italy, about the self-healing of concrete. Self-healing of concrete, you add in the mix design special agents from bacteria to reduce the cracks, as you can see, 0 day, 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, without self-healing agent, and this is with self-healing agent. You can see that the cracks are filled with the products. These products are calcium carbonate to close the cracks of the concrete. And this is an ongoing research, and we are in the process of producing more data about this research. This is the concrete before and after curing for several days of wetting and drying. And this simulates the heavy rains which our infrastructure in the UK are exposed to most of the time. So the self-healing concrete will be a good solution. I would like to mention that we can also inject the existing concrete with the self-healing agents to reduce the cracks, not only with the new concrete mixing using self-healing agents, but old concrete as well. This is the last thing, that the in situ assessment of concrete elements. Now, I was just saying about self-healing, about cracking, about using of waste materials, how to assess the concrete compared with the control concrete or the concrete elements without any additions. How to assess? Normally in the lab using the crushing machine, the compressive testing machine, but there is a short portable apparatus I developed in the lab. This is based on the assessment of impermeability or air permeability of concrete using such a special tool. And you can carry out this in the lab or in situ to assess any condition of concrete. Quick testing, non-destructive, to assess the concrete quality on site. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I'm always impressed with somebody who's got more letters after their name than actually have letters in their name. So well done for that. Interesting stuff. I mean, obviously living in Brentford, we are living almost under the flyover, which has got the concrete cancer. And they've been working on that for the past, feels like must be the past 15 years or at least 10 years. But it seems longer to me. Thank you so much. Interesting insights. And our next, thank you. We'll do questions at the end, I'm thinking. Our next speaker is another academic, Dr. Amy Burnett from Middlesex University. Amy, do you want to take over?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much. So I will just go to sharing my screen and then I will introduce myself, and just want to say thank you very much to the Chamber for having Middlesex to speak, because we've had the joy of being able to present at a few of your sessions. So, right, okay. So can everyone see that okay? Yep, okay. So hopefully this is all you can see. So I'm going to talk to you about biodiversity net gain. And one of the things I'd like to kind of know, we haven't really got time to make it really, really interactive, but I would love to know, how many of you have actually used the planning process, and in particular, what's been your experience, and how you see biodiversity net gain as potentially shaping your business in going forward. So this is part of a project that we are running at Middlesex University, which is SME Nature Positive Finance. And essentially this project is all about trying to look at how the metrics that are used by financiers, which in this case could include the metrics towards biodiversity net gain in shaping development, how they are encouraging like a nature positive response. And a nature positive is a bit of one of those kind of jargonistic terms slightly, so maybe that's not the most suitable terminology, so we can just call it biodiversity for now. And this project has got lots of different partners, and it's a very exciting project which is funded by the Natural Environment Research Council. So I wanted just to talk a little bit, particularly around the opportunities for biodiversity net gain for SMEs, and try and just raise some awareness about what's going on in London, who the key players are, what the process is like, what the trajectories look like, how you can get involved, even if you might not necessarily qualify for, being a landowner or a developer. And so essentially I just want to run through that with you. So hopefully you feel more informed about the process. I don't want to dwell too much on these slides, which have got lots of text on them, but I just want to quickly just make sure they're all on the same page, which is essentially BNG, biodiversity net gain, is now mandatory for all development in England as of February this year. That is something that's stemming from the Environment Act 2021, which was the government's response to try and develop a really kind of ambitious agenda for addressing biodiversity and environmental issues after Brexit. And there's also, not only at national level, there's also local plans. So there's a London plan, which has got BNG, which we'll come to talk about. And essentially developers got to deliver 10% net gain when they develop a site. And that's not without its issues in terms of measurement, but we'll just skip that for a second. Developers need to submit a biodiversity gain plan, which is approved by a local planning authority, and BNG can be delivered either on the site where you are developing, off-site, maybe in London or in the borough, or as a last resort, you can purchase statutory biodiversity credits through a national pipeline. And this is following something called the mitigation hierarchy, which essentially prioritises to enhance development and biodiversity net gain at as close to the development site as possible. There are markets emerging from biodiversity net gain, and this is secured by like a legal covenant, conservation covenant, or a Section 106 agreement with a local planning authority. And essentially there's like a land use market, which is kind of generating a habitat and BNG unit, which is then kind of traded and purchased by developers. It's quite a complex supply of land and lots of different dynamics in the way of trying to kind of get this market rolling smoothly. But that's probably for a discussion for another time. But BNG can also be stacked with other benefits from nature markets, such as nutrient neutrality or voluntary carbon markets, but you cannot have the same, you cannot be paid twice for something essentially. Just very quickly on the cost of BNG. So if you want to register a site on the National BNG Registry, that's going to cost you £639. There are also, it's a requirement that ecologists are meant to kind of measure the units that you have, and that can cost quite a lot of money. In some cases, we've heard that it can cost up to £12,000 for a wholesale site to kind of be measured. But there isn't necessarily like a set fee for that, but it can be quite expensive. So in response, there's been something called the Joe Bloom's measurement tool, which has come up, which is specifically designed for SMEs, and that it estimates is between 495 to 995 per site. Now, obviously, there is an expectation that the measurement of the B&G unit, which is something I'll come on to discuss in a second, is meant to be done by a qualified ecologist. So I'm just telling you that this site, this small site's B&G tool exists, and also not necessarily to say that, you know, we would need to kind of check just how it reconciles with the Natural England small sites B&G tool. But what I'm trying to show you is that there are tools which are developing for SMEs to deliver on B&G in response to the fact that it is really, really expensive to get going if you use a qualified ecologist, because one of the challenges that we've identified is that, I mean, somebody used the phrase killing small sites, which might be a bit extreme, and I think they were talking in the hypothetical, but if it's going to cost a lot of money to even get going with B&G, then it's going to be an issue to get these smaller sites going without favouring really, really large developers and development. So those kind of, like, you know, the fairness and the cost and all those kind of things need to be considered in the design of B&G and the tools that are available to support SMEs in particular to use it. I'm going to skip over this really quickly because I don't want this necessarily to be the focus of the presentation, but just that the metric looks at things like habitat size, habitat condition, strategic significance, and habitat type, which then generates a score which can then be used to kind of trade and be purchased by developers so that they can build and it get approved by the local planning authority. How much time have I got left? Oh, Sally, I didn't hear, sorry.
You've got about 5 minutes.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Apologies for the, it's not particularly clear, this diagram, but essentially there are these different phases of biodiversity net gain, and each of these require different actions, and each of these require different actors or stakeholders that are involved. So you've got the kind of assessment, which we've talked about. So that is looking at, you know, the ecologist, which might do the baseline assessment, or potentially these new SME tools which are emerging. But as I say, I'm not necessarily, you know, I haven't done, I don't know exactly the alignment between them. So actually reconciling that is like, you know, you have to do detailed investigation if you were to take that forward with appropriate advice. However, at the assessment level, there are different actors. So like ecologists, the landowner comes in, they're the ones putting forward the site. And also there are these different measurements solutions. So AI is something that's coming in, using AI to kind of like inform a biodiversity assessment. There's something called AI Dash. Also, you know, feel free to kind of look into that. But then there's also kind of a boots on the ground approach to things. And then you've got the actual development planning, where you put together the application and the B&G plan. And then when it gets approved, you've got the compensation mechanisms, how you're going to get paid for it. That's then verified and measured and remeasured at different points in time, confirming that over a 30-year period that B&G has been delivered. And then you have like the long-term management arrangements which are securing that, so the conservation covenant or the Section 106 agreement underpinning it all. And I just wanted to go back to looking at London in particular, because that's a very kind of high-level approach. So the GLA, the Greater London Authority, is really active in this biodiversity net gain space, as are the different boroughs. And I really wanted to draw attention, I have mentioned it before in one of the presentations that I've made at the Chambers, but I don't know if the same people are in the room. So essentially there's the Green Space Information Greater London Giggle. And I've got a separate slide on that, because I think they're really important, that you should just know what they're doing and potentially feed into that, even if it's outside of biodiversity net gain. Developers are obviously a very key player in this. They're the ones who want to build, and they have to secure B&G to do that. But then obviously you've got the landowners and the land agents and even the tenants. So the tenants can actually work with landowners to support biodiversity net gain. And biodiversity net gain, it can be achieved through lots of different ways. You know, you can have like a green roof, you could do particular landscaping. When you're looking at off-site measures, you're kind of looking at you know, nature recovery and biodiversity through land use change. So that might be changing arable land into kind of wild meadows or even woodland. So there's lots of different kind of actions that you can take. But then also I think that there are other stakeholders that have got a role in not only biodiversity net gain, but biodiversity more broadly as it relates to planning and construction, which includes trade and industry bodies, Chamber of Commerce, SMEs and communities. And that's the kind of what I want to focus on going forward a little bit. Before I just want to quickly introduce some of the work that Giggle's been doing. So this is, if you go on the Giggle website, you'll find that they've got the London Ecological Network. And you can see here, you know, the areas that are really green and the areas that are less green. So, you know, here, and this would be a good activity for the Chamber to do potentially with Giggle. It's like looking at West London, you know, like where are the areas where there's good pockets of woodland and biodiversity and where aren't there? And so here you've got like a habitat score. And I'm assuming, I might be wrong, but I don't know if this is the Heathrow area. So that I may be completely wrong about that, but I think this would be a very good map for businesses to look collectively with the trade, you know, the Chamber of Commerce and Giggle and you know, London Borough of Hounslow, and kind of really think about solutions to outside of BNG as well. Just to kind of quickly tell you what's going on in London. So you've got London Pan, you've got the urban greening factor, which is trying to create space for nature and new development. You've got local plans and incorporating biodiversity net gain policies. So for instance, biodiversity action plans. And then the GLA is also involved in a London-wide local nature recovery strategy. And Giggle is trying to look at a London offsite register, which would complement the national offsite register as well. So that's just very quickly some things. And then I think I'm not going to, I haven't really got time to talk about this, but with Giggle, they're trying to do lots of stuff around measurement of environmental assets, essentially. And there's lots of opportunities to get involved with what they're doing. For instance, they're trying to ascertain biodiversity hotspots for planning, which can help developers and businesses understand like how they can contribute in their local area to addressing particular hotspots where biodiversity might be poor. They can provide data search reports which could be you know, really good for businesses and SMEs to support their understanding of what is in their area in terms of biodiversity and how to feed that into their business. Quick challenges, because London hasn't got a huge amount of land, and so that will kind of raise issues in the delivery of BNG. There's also lots of additional costs, which I've already mentioned, which might affect viability. Biodiversity is not the only thing that planning needs to consider. There's lots of different impacts and measures and weightings that planners and developers and you know, it's complex planning, which is, you know, it's exciting but at the same time challenging as well, when this is something that's already adding a cost on top, but at the same time it's vital to meet the, you know, response to the ecological emergency that we face. So just want to say like how you can get involved really. So I think I'm going to skip that slide for now because I don't think I've got time to go through it, but these are the kind of two things, two routes, if you like. If you think that you might be able to benefit or put a site forward for a biodiversity gain register, so you've got a piece of land and you think that you might be able to generate some income from it by contributing it to like a supply of biodiversity net gain, so you can kind of register that. And then that would then be, you know, you'd kind of like have to get that site ready, you'd have to get the baseline done, but then that can go in like the pot, essentially, where developers can purchase credits and then you can earn an income over a 30-year period. So that's great if you think that you can do that, or you can work with your landowner. If you've got a particular office and then you've got some land associated with it, you could do that. And so that, you know, I think whether you're or not you're thinking of BNG anyway, is get acquainted with Giggle, have a giggle, because I think that they're doing fantastic work and they could probably help your business in more ways than you can think about at the moment. And think about how you can kind of contribute to London's biodiversity data bank. There are these tools which I've mentioned, like the DEFRA Nudging and Small Sites metric. There's also the Joe Bloom's SME BNG tool, which I encourage you to look at and make your own decision about what you think about, the suitability of that in the expectation that it has to be measured in a certain way. But even if you're not thinking about biodiversity net gain, there are lots of things that you can do. So for instance, think about how to mainstream BNG thinking into your business. So taking the principles of enhancing biodiversity in your business, in where your business operates, even if it's just simple landscaping or putting out bird boxes or swift boxes or whatever it is, like a beehive, if you are suitably inclined to do that. What are the steps that your business can take to support nature in your immediate area? And also ask about how your sector might, because obviously every sector is different. Do they have guidance on biodiversity? Try and be an advocate for change and try and just ask the question about biodiversity, like really mainstream it into everything that you do on a day-to-day basis. And then also, there could be a nature positive or a biodiversity award category when the Chamber of Commerce or the London Chamber of Commerce holds an awards day. There could be a category for biodiversity as well. And then also thinking about involving yourself in environmental partnerships, become a citizen scientist. So yes, okay, ecologists can capture lots of data, but how can you use the latest apps and technology and support Giggle in their work to really map what London has in terms of its biodiversity? Buddy up with local neighbouring businesses, even residents, think what you can do collectively. And a couple of more really quick things is think about, find out more about the Task Force for Nature Related.
Aware of the time, Amy, sorry.
And I'm done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased that Lisa's on the call because I do think with that biodiversity could be a topic, an award sector for next year. So thank you very much, and also for explaining, BNG, which I must admit I hadn't really understood. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, next up is Paul Vick, who is an architect running the Paul Vick Architects practice. He's undertaken low energy new build and retrofit, and he wrote an 8,000 home zero carbon development 20 years ago prior to setting up the practice. He recently gave a talk to the City of London Lord Mayor's lecture series at the Gresham Society on how architecture can solve the climate challenges. Now, Paul, I know you are passionate about your topic, but you only have 7 minutes. Oh, sorry, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Thank you.
I'm watching you.
Fantastic. And I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you for doing this, because I think the notion of just talking about these things and what they were talking about in COP26 of micro communication, and you were saying just before, just talking about these things and bringing them to the front, I think is essential. For me, I sometimes wonder what all the fuss is about in creating sustainable buildings. We've had off-grid homes and cities for centuries in wetter, colder and hotter climates than in the UK. So to my mind, it is one of sort of how we think about it and go about it. And we're not strangers, as Sally was saying, to the sort of complexities of today's world or its simplification, and we've looked at both passive house approaches, which often we like because they minimize the amount of energy that are used in the first place. And we've done that with new build and retrofit, as well as working now on a 22-acre and a 5-acre regeneration site. So we're looking at a whole series of infrastructure strategies, as well as how do you do it with a building. And I think one of the things to emphasize is, in my belief, that it's all possible actually, and the technology is probably almost there already, although it is not easy. The hardest thing is understanding how to do it. And we looked at a vision for the Diocese of London, whose area goes from King's Cross to the Thames, St Paul's Cathedral, which was their big regeneration project in the 17th century, all the way over to Westminster. And they have a lot of existing buildings, as well as a whole world of how do you go about integrating employment, learning, and all the sort of social things that go with that. For us, the starting point then is, why are we, in looking for these answers, why we are where we are and why we're doing what we are, growth seems to be one of the big nuts that needs to be understood, I think, quite properly in positioning it. And that is the growth of population, growth of capital, growth of commodity and resource use. And I think that's a good place to start in a way. You've got growth not being a bad thing in itself. And there's, at the same time, as we know, there's sort of a finite world and a finite speed at which resources are replenished and waste removed. So that sort of cycle is sort of fundamental, really. And this is not new news, right? There was the Limits of Growth report in the 1971, updated in 2005, and now they're modeling it through 2022, and now they're keeping to do that. Today, we're sort of at the high risk for what they're calling planetary boundaries, which was updated in 2023. And that talks about nitrogen, biodiversity, and climate change as some of the limits of what is sustainable within our world, really, to work as a system. The second part incorporates the sort of the human development factors: food deprivation, health, gender equality, political voice, housing, which are often described as the inner boundary of these planetary boundaries. And Ray Worth in Donut Economics, that you might have come across in 2017, talked about these sort of ecological ones, if you like, about the planet, and also talks about the social one and how we have to keep that balance between the two. So obviously it's quite a large, complex series of questions. But at the same time, we should be really, positive about it, in my view, because we've recovered the ozone layer. There's been massive steps in releasing so many people from absolute poverty, and continues every day at the moment. It's just still, there's a long way to go. And in 1987, the Brundtland report said the major issues were actually political and economic, not technological. That was 1987. And it's only like through the Johnson government and subsequently we've had a built environment industrial strategy that has started to direct these head on. And in the way the UK sort of seems to work is that if we can get ahead of the game globally, we may be able to export that expertise. And that is the process that we seem to be going through now. And nobody's saying it's that easy, but the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to be. And there's been lots of studies going back to the 80s and before of how to cost this. At the same time, there's a lot more growth to be expected in London. Over the next 25 years, we're expecting sort of 8 City of Yorks to be built. So we're estimated to grow from 11.5 million to 11.5 million by 2050, from say 8.9 million in 20. So it's a 29% growth, plus our connectivity. So we've still got all these issues going on. So how do you start to address that? And for me, innovation is about the giving of value to knowledge, which was a thing we used when we did perhaps what was the first innovation hub in the UK with Smithfield Market with the City of London. And the point there is it's not just about the technology or the lever, it's what you do with it. And this works sort of cross-party, whether it was, and the survival of cities and looking forward, whether it was Jane Jacobs or the economist Schumpeter, we've now got a sort of cross-party approach. So the political will is sort of catching up, maybe a little bit late, but it's still important, and really we can do a lot about it. For us as architects, the starting point is, where do we start to find alignments between economic challenges and climate challenges? And the first one we ask is, don't build what you don't need to build. And that won't appear on any benchmark. It just won't be there because it's not part of the benchmark. How do you account for that? As a developer, you can get more in, and there's been studies on density and how to do density across this, the world really, but particularly in the UK, and there's a lot done at Cambridge in the 60s. We're not really still learning the messages of perhaps we don't need such wider roads to get lower rise and more efficient building. So don't build what you don't need. And that applies for new build and retrofit, which somebody's mentioned. We've got a lot of retrofit. The other then question that goes with that, perhaps as an extension of that, is that if we've got a lot of existing buildings, more than half of that is made up of services. So how do you reduce the services in it? And services don't last that long on the whole, 15, maybe 20 years if you're lucky, when you have to replace your boiler. So it doesn't make economic sense really to do that. So how do you then create very well insulated buildings, reduce heating requirements, and perhaps even think about what levels of comfort are appropriate? And it wasn't that long ago that we had much lower expectancies and legislation about lower levels of comfort, although that's a difficult thing to sell to the market. And now we talk about the market. Well, they're already showing that with higher EPCs, which is us at the beginning, by the way, you will be getting more money for your building. So there becomes an inherent cycle to that. And understanding that you could lower the infrastructure costs as well is a really fundamental way of squaring the circle. The other thing that we've asked then as a question as architects is, what's the building worth to you and your users and your clients that helps you live longer? So again, economically, that's off the scale. And there's no reason then perhaps to do it. And this is across all the sectors, not just the care sector. So we started writing a vision for one of the oldest care homes in the country just before COVID. We lived through it vicariously with them, and now we've moved post-COVID to see how we can do that. But it applies to all of us and all our types of buildings. So I just say that innovation is not just about the lever, it's about what you do with it. It's about people, places, lives, buildings, infrastructure, and economies, and they all have contexts and hierarchies. And we can all keep giving value through that knowledge that we have, even if it's not always that straightforward at the boardroom table. And that should give us a lot of hope, motivation, and intention, because it's, as Burnett would say, it's not really about the technology, it's about how we get on with it with political and economic will. I suppose that's the message. If I've got more time, I can talk about strategies if that's of interest. Yeah, and there's a lot on the pragmatics to talk about, but I'm a firm believer that it's possible. Well, we've already done it. So it's again then how do you create that and move that forward, really? Yeah. Yeah.
That's lovely. I think you've said it all, Paul. Thank you so much. I do like that. Don't build what you don't need. I think that's a simple mantra to have. I am aware of time as always. Our next speaker is Katie Sampford from St. George PLC. Katie is the Sustainability Manager. We are holding a drinks reception at the new Green Quarter, which is on the site in Southall at the old gasworks, and it is amazing. So if you haven't booked a place, do come along to see what they're doing there. I've been bowled away by it. It's so impressive. Katie, please, over to you.
Thank you, Sally. So I'm just going to share some slides. Hopefully you can all see those. So yeah, as Sally said, I'm Sustainability Manager for St. George. So I cover all of our projects across London, but particularly focus on sort of the Green Quarter. Before I go into detail about the Green Quarter and what we're doing there, I thought I'd just give a bit of an overview about what sort of Berkeley does and sort of the strategy behind everything. So our vision as Berkeley Group is to be a world-class business trusted to transform the most challenging sites into exceptional places and maximise our positive impact on society, economy and the natural world. Within this strategy, we have 10 key priority areas, which you can see here on the screen, and essentially the three that stand out for sustainability and that are sort of my team's responsibility to deliver are communities, climate action and nature. Each of these priorities is underpinned with various targets. For example, climate action, we have a 50% reduction in scope 1 and 2 emissions and 40% in scope 3 by 2030. For communities, we look for all of our developments to have a community plan and measure social value. And then for nature, we have a target around biodiversity net gain, which Amy's very nicely gone over. So I don't need to worry too much about explaining that. But Berkeley set that target back in 2019 to achieve 10% net gain. So we've been doing quite a lot of work on that area before the legislation came in. So yeah, the Green Quarter is over in Southall. So it's an 88-acre site that was a former gasworks, which you can see on the left. It was used as Heathrow purple parking. We then purchased the site and in 2014, and we went under a 3-year kind of extensive remediation process, costing about £200 million worth of investment just to get the site to a condition that we can then build on it safely and sustainably, of course. So there's going to be 3,750 homes with also some sort of commercial space and public amenities, and 50% of that site or of our site will be dedicated to open space. So with Amy's map of the green, hopefully we're bringing a bit more greenery to Ealing than there was before. So phase 1 in particular is our phase that's recently completed in 2019. It comprises of 623 homes spread across just over 9 acres, and 30% of those homes are affordable housing. The photo that you see on the right is of part of Central Gardens, which is the play park. We also have an amphitheatre, 600-metre water feature that runs through the site and will continue as the landscaping progresses. The Central Gardens is 1.5 acres of park with 804 new trees, and all of the homes are built with sustainability in mind as well. So we have a fabric first approach. We install only the top efficient appliances. We have rainwater harvesting, which captures rainwater and is used for irrigation around the scheme and sort of the landscaping areas. And we have an on-site energy centre as well, which is the heating strategy for the development, comprising of heat pumps with backup boilers that supply each home. And we obviously incorporate EV charging and cycle spaces as well. We've also delivered Parkside Yard, which is our meanwhile community space. So because it's such a large development and we're not going to complete for a very long time, we obviously want the residents and community to have something to use whilst we're constructing the commercial space. So Parkside Yards supports 4 local businesses at the moment. So we have Open Southall, which is a creative maker space, and they run various art workshops and different classes like chess, pottery, and all kinds of things like that. We have Southall Coffee House, which is a nice coffee shop and Italian restaurant, Yarn Tings, and Plant Life. We also have 3 paddle courts that we've recently opened as well that sit just behind this, that are open to the public and the community. We've recently partnered with Sharks Canoe Club as well, so you can access Grand Union Canal now, and we've partnered with them to deliver canoeing classes as well. You can see we've got a jumping pillow and children's play space too, and then our wonderful tree nursery. So the tree nursery houses 600 trees of 6 different species. The idea is obviously that we're growing them locally on site, and then they will be planted in the future phases of the scheme to help reduce transport emissions and improve local air quality, of course. We also use these for various community events and workshops. We've hosted yoga sessions, which I think we've got some next week. And then we also do schools events there as well. So last year we had, and again this year, we had a 2-day schools event where we invited 4 local schools in, of about 300 students in total each year. And we get London Wildlife Trust in to do various workshops, and also Elite Landscapes to do sort of plant potting as well. So sort of teaching children the importance of nature, about biodiversity net gain, and everything that we're trying to do at the Green Quarter. I thought I'd go into a little bit of sort of what we do during construction as well, in terms of sustainability. So a big focus is waste reduction. So we've got various things. This is just a handful that we do whilst building to make sure we minimise our impact. So, for example, we had the Corex Take Back scheme on site. So Corex is a plastic sheeting that we use as protection, and a lot of it goes to waste in the construction industry. So Protec, who are the supplier, they offer a closed loop take back scheme. So essentially they take the sheets back by you segregate it on site. They take it back to their facility in Sheffield. They wash it, they thread it, they put it back into pellets, and then they make more sheets out of it. So essentially none of it really goes to waste, as long as it makes it back to their facility. So we have that on site. We have vape recycling. We've also recently done a PPE recycling scheme. So PPE is all the protective clothing and hard hats, and quite a lot of it gets wasted because you have different contractors and trades coming on and off site. Some of it gets damaged, some of it gets dirty. So quite a lot of it will end up going to waste. So in partnership with our logistics contractor, we looked at how we can tackle that as a problem, and we launched a sort of closed loop scheme. So similar to the Protec idea, we collected PPE on site, it got sent back to a facility and essentially sorted into what could be washed and directly reused, or what could be repurposed into other items like fire blankets and can't think what the other items were. I think some of it was like play equipment and all sorts. And through that trial, we achieved 100% diversion from landfill of that waste, which was really good. We also do lots of cleanup events, so World Environment Day, World Cleanup Day. We get the teams out and we do local litter picks along the canal and around Southall. We have one again this Saturday, so if any of you are in the area, feel free to come down. We'll be carrying it out down near the canal on Saturday. And then we donate a lot of materials to various things. For example, recently we built some bug hotels with this local scouts group. We're looking to renovate a garden area for our charity partner MenCap, and we'll donate materials from site to that as well. And we did a waste apprentice day last year, so there was about 10 or 15 apprenticeships in waste management, and we took them on site to talk about the importance of waste and how to manage it well from a sustainability perspective. For climate action, we use HVO biofuel, so hopefully you'll have some understanding, but it's essentially a much more sustainable option than diesel, with 90% reduction in CO2 emissions, because obviously you're essentially burning material that previously absorbed carbon from the atmosphere. So it's almost carbon neutral if you think of it like that, as long as you're using a sustainable sourced fuel. So for phase 3, the phase that's currently under construction, we've used 95% HVO use. It would be 100%, but unfortunately one of our contractors delivered fuel incorrectly on one occasion, so it brought us down. But to date, we've used 147,000 litres of biofuel, and if this had been diesel, we would have emitted 461 tonnes of carbon. So we've saved just over 400 tonnes from doing so. We also have canteen oil recycling scheme, so our canteen oil actually gets sent to be turned into biofuel, not the biofuel that we procure, but it does get sent back into that supply chain. We also have our bike hire scheme, so this is to promote sustainable transport within Southall and around the Green Quarter. So people, works like Santander bikes, people can just hire the bikes, and we have docking stations on the development and at the station. We also have our flywheel, or we had flywheel generators on site. So we try and use electricity as our main energy source, but sometimes it can be challenging, and with the progression of the build, you need something on site. So there was a time period where we were waiting for the electricity to be installed and we needed to use generators. So instead of using typical diesel, unsustainable generator, we opted for flywheel generators. So these are essentially coupled with battery storage. So from the generation of the energy, you have a flywheel which captures the waste heat, and then that gets stored in a battery, which is then available for off-peak energy support. We saved about 5 tonnes of carbon a week as an estimate by using these. So over their hire period was another 141 tonnes saved. We do a lot of work for communities and trying to engage with the residents of Southall and Ealing and supporting various local businesses. I mean, this is just a real handful of examples, but if any of you have been to Southall Station, you may have seen the Coffee Court, which is our coffee van. We partnered with Arias in town, and essentially they now operate from opposite the station as well. Our team frequently go to West London College dinners, so they have a taste restaurant there, and essentially you pay about £25, I think it is, per head for a 3-course meal, which is cooked and served by the students of the college. And it's really popular amongst our staff because it's a great night and the food and the service is amazing. We sponsor Southall football team. We've done artist exhibitions, community fun days, college and career days. And recently we hosted Women in Construction breakfast as well. And yeah, that's it really.
Thank you so much indeed, Katie. As I say, we're holding an event at the Parkside Yards on the 25th of September, and the food is being supplied by the Southall Coffee House. So I'm really pleased. So please do come along to see it for yourself. I'm so amazed by it. I actually went back at the weekend to I went for a visit, then went back at the weekend to have another look. It is incredible what they're doing there. Right, now somebody always has to have the graveyard slot, and sadly today it's David Sheldon from Home EcoEarner. Sorry, David, do you want to take the floor? You fit in nicely to what Paul was sort of saying about reducing the cost of a building, reducing the services of a building, and keeping your energy costs down. So David, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you, Alan and Sally, for arranging the webinar today and inviting me to speak. My topic is keeping electricity costs under control.
Sorry, David, can you turn your camera on?
Sorry.
You're a bit...
there we are.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So I'm going to briefly touch on 4 points. Big picture, no cost, low cost things that we can do. Changing the mindset about renewable energy, and then some on the ground practical aspects. So firstly, to go to the big picture, keeping electricity costs under control is essentially at the core of our climate challenge. It's a journey. It's not going to be an overnight thing. There's no magic bullet. It's going to be a combination of different technologies and tweaking and adjusting things here and there. Pardon me. So it's a process of continual improvement, but it's a journey we should all enjoy because of the process of improving our climate and improving the world around us. In terms of no cost or low cost, there are things that we can do to keep electricity costs under control, such as the sorts of things that our parents or grandparents might have done, simply stopping the draft coming under the door or around windows, turning off devices that are on standby, closing curtains and blinds, turning off lights when you leave the room. Things that the grandparents used to do that, well, many of us these days have sort of largely forgotten. Making sure you're on the right tariff can also help. Setting heating to avoid peak load times is another one. These are all unexciting, boring things to do really, but they are effective and they can help save electricity costs. As the man says, every little bit helps, and they're not hard to do, and there's no out-of-pocket cost to doing them. So they're the first sort of things that come to mind and should be put into practice. But I'm also going to add to no cost or low cost grouping, double glazing of windows and renewable energy. In the UK, double glazing of windows should be included here. It's a relatively low cost, but very effective. And to my way of thinking, renewable energy also belongs in the low cost solution category, which leads on to my next point. One of the problems that the renewable energy industry has is renewable energy is always viewed as a cost rather than an investment. That perception has taken hold in the minds of the average consumer. Change always involves effort, and it's much easier to just keep doing what we're doing. So these human elements tend to reinforce that perception. We could get a much greater uptake of renewable energy, home-based renewable energy systems, if we were able to change that perception. but it's up to us as an industry to do that. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the average UK household uses 10.3 kilowatt hours a day of electricity, averaged across a year. For many homes, solar panels and batteries can cover that own use portion for much of the year. Not during January and December, January, but for most of the other months of the year, to either cover it or indeed in summer generate a slight surplus. And they can do that for no greater cost than is already being paid for electricity from the grid. At my company, we start with a customer P&L. We say, what can we do for the customer in terms of designing and costing? I'm sorry about my reminders clicking along. What can we do for the customer to ensure that the electricity system that we install, renewable energy system, solar, batteries, entails no greater monthly cost outlay than they're already bearing for their electricity cost? That's a challenging metric to achieve sometimes, particularly for small homes where there's a small roof area. But we've so far managed in all of our proposals to deliver that result. So it's a bit of a mantra in our company that we start out that the customer must be able to afford the system. And largely that sees the customer just swapping what is dead money paid on electricity bills for an investment in their own renewable energy system. That investment has long-term benefits for them because it puts in a fixed cost that has a long tail benefit. And that long tail benefit is just like an investment. So we view renewable energy as something that is not a cost, it's a cost saver. And for our customers, it can become an eco-earner. So at a practical level, to turn to the practical points, we focus on social impact, on what we can do for affordable housing households, and on trying to address energy poverty in the course of delivering renewable energy systems. Sally, I've tried to keep it very brief, knowing that I was in the graveyard slot. So I would like to finish there, if I may.
Okay, that sounds lovely. Alan, you're on the call also. Would you like to do a quick sort of wrap up, please? I'm aware of time, so that would be lovely.
Right. Well, I've got 20 questions to ask.
Oh yes.
All right. I'm going to generalize dramatically. I always think this industry and developments of big cities are based on two things. You either expand up or you expand out. And with better transport infrastructure, London's been able to expand out. And expand out in terms of going via the Elizabeth line to Southall, which has managed to get the wonderful Parkside estate to be built, which is a really good accomplishment. But in my view, post-COVID, a lot more people would like, if they can afford it, to live in houses with gardens as they work from home instead of working in apartments. So how do you make those apartments more interesting? Otherwise, you go further and further and further out. Like Sally, I've been along to the Parkside estate in Southall. Sorry, it's called Parkside, isn't it?
It's Parkside Yards. The estate is called Green Quarter.
Parkside Yards. Okay. I was at the opening with Sally of this estate. I've been to the paddle court opening there, and what they've managed to build around there is a whole infrastructure of things that you can see, do, and be part of, which is a wonderful achievement. But how can you make these type of things environmentally sustainable? Which is where David and people like Paul come along with very clever ideas about these things. I guess the real elephants in the room that people would like to know a bit more about, and can I put this question to everybody, is cladding. we're still haunted by the issues that are still going on from what happened next door to us in Hammersmith and Fulham. How many of these old buildings have still got the wrong type of cladding, and has the legislation changed so that new cladding going on buildings is fire resistant properly? Is that the type of question, Katie, you can answer, or maybe Dr. Amy Burnett?
I could have a go at some of these.
Or Paul, please do. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so you've asked, I mean, to try and keep it short, because there's obviously tomes of things here. But the first one about the densification of cities and the desire for green space. And we can talk about cladding separately, but let's just talk about that one. Firstly, it's not just up or out. I think you're missing something there. There was a series of studies done just geometrically around high-rise versus courtyard buildings about 50 years ago. So a lot of these issues are not particularly new. It's the context in which we've got to apply them that's new. And they found that if you could imagine a block and you put a high-rise on it to a certain height, and then you compared that geometrically and volumetrically with putting courtyards around the edges, what was the difference? Well, actually, they found that mid-rise was actually the same achievement of high-rise for those sort of things. So that's one thing. And so if you think about what they've, again, you know, adding extra stories onto existing buildings, how do you do that? There's lots of opportunities to do that. If you look even around in South Ken, you know, near the Memorial, the Albert Memorial, and the Albert Hall, some of those buildings are 12 stories high, and they're not perceived as particularly tall. So there's actually just a physical thing that I think there's a misconception around one thing or the other. And also to bear in mind that London, central London itself, has huge parks and a lot of green area. And that sort of model can be replicated outside of London. So again, just the thinking about it. With that comes then this notion, is London a popular place? Well, yes, lots of people want to live at this density. So I don't necessarily think that the concept that everybody needs a huge garden each is necessarily there. Although in the UK, you know, your home is your castle. But actually, large parks can be enjoyed, river walks can be enjoyed and are enjoyed, and have been increasingly, you know, pushed out there, and public policy has helped with that. So I think there's a lot of positive things going on there. And then if you think of somewhere like Bedford Park, which was the first sort of you know, the first part of the green sort of city, if you like, and you know, that's can be reasonably dense. Now that's a certain model, you don't have to do it that way, but it's seen as like the starting point of this movement, if you like, in the modern era from the 19th century. So for those of you who don't know, it's in West London. It's now very high values, but it wasn't at the time when it was built. And the idea was that people who couldn't afford to be in London would come out to, you know, this part of London in the East End of Ealing, if you like, you know, and it's a lot of trees and there's a certain density. These things can all be drawn on to do wonderful things, as well as have hierarchies of public and private. How do you make it more interesting? Flats, for us, great light is a fantastic thing. Orientation, I think, you know, is something that's not fully understood. Why should we have glass buildings, glass on every side? The glass industry will say, well, there are very different types of glass out there for different, but it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, so and in Europe, the buildings generally are a lot more efficient than they are in this country. And perhaps we should be just aspiring to do something much, much better than what we're being asked to do at the moment, and try to stay ahead of that curve. So does that start to answer those questions? The other thing that's become very important is infill sites. They were trying to do that back in the 70s and 80s, and they're now returning to it with the government policy. How do you define what is grey area and what isn't? That is a difficult one in particular. But there are lots of sites out there. They're just quite expensive to do for the larger developer. But bear in mind, most of London was built by small developers. And it's great to see that still happening. And why architects, you know, they talk about the great things by the GLA, that was a really small proportion of what was actually built. So if we can encourage that and encourage beautiful, great, you know, low energy buildings to be built going forward, then, you know, we're on to a winner. And I love this notion of the David's about the EcoEarner, that how do you turn that self-investment into, you know, run expenditure to something for that. I think that's a great philosophy, really.
Excellent.
Katie, would you like to say a few things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess since 2017, there's been quite a lot of changes in the legislation anyway. So in terms of new builds, you know, having to meet the Safety Act, Building Safety Act and Fire Act and everything like that. And obviously, you know, old historic buildings have now got to be retrofit to meet those legislation changes too. So I think to answer your question, yes, but I guess it's in, you know, I don't know if there's a time constraint on that for the older buildings. But you certainly, if you look around, see a lot of cladding being taken down and redone, so you can see it in practice.
Superb. I think it's good to hear that constantly being pushed out to people so they're assured that there's a rolling programme being delivered by the industry across the whole estate. Sally, we're out of time. Come on,
Yes,
give
we
me some
are.
pressure. Tell me to
yes.
shut up.
I do find these webinars, they're fascinating. It's lovely to get specialists in their field just talking and sharing their knowledge. So thank you so much to all our speakers today. Thank you, Alan, for a lovely wrap up. Love your questions. And just thank you all. Have a good day, and do try and come along on the 25th of September to see the Green Quarter for yourself. It's well worth a visit. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
New Zealand, Ibrahim, masalama. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Ma salama. Ma salama.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.